The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
Almighty God, we ask that you send us your Holy Spirit and be with us here today. Help me to speak clearly and to communicate clearly, but also help us to interact and to come closer to you in all ways and to glorify you. We ask this in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
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 All right. So at the beginning, let's begin. So growing up, I want to, really a lot of a person's initial formation has a lot to do with their spiritual life. And I want to talk a little bit about my parents briefly. So both of my parents, I was the oldest of two children in our family, and both of my parents, so my grandparents, so I had my two grandmothers, they were very strongly affected by alcohol. So addiction to alcoholism. And both of my grandfathers were affected by just workaholism, just excessive work. So rarely around the house, very much into their work. So both of my parents had that experience growing up. And so the two of them found each other and they started their family. And the thing is that, my dad, he was frequently moved from town to town as he was growing up. So every year it was a new town. And so he would walk around and try to make new friends. That was a lonely thing for him. So for my dad, he found that church was a place where he could go and meet people. And it was kind of a tool that he would use. It was something that he would go and he would show up to there and he would want to meet people. Now, I think that the big issue for my parents, especially my dad, growing up in that whole, they were born in 1939, 1940. They were very strongly affected by World War II. And so, the whole idea of, being disconnected from his parents a little bit, emotionally from his mom, and, as well as from his dad due to the work dad being absent. My dad really struggled to try to believe God existed. And of course, with things like the evils of World War II, with the whole concentration camps in Nazi Germany, it's just so hard to reconcile. How can you have this all-powerful, all-loving God that just sits by and does nothing while terrible things are going on? And so my dad was kind of wondering, I wonder, does God really exist? And the thing is also, during all of this, there's a lot of fear that was coming up in World War II, a lot of fear of others, fear of things going wrong. That was something that really even kind of is with my dad today. Both my parents are alive, and my dad still has this fear, so that does run pretty strongly in him. And so that was kind of beat into me for sure, growing up. And but still, despite not really knowing if God exists, not really knowing that the world is a safe place, there was still this idea that we would go to church and we would just be there. But the thing is that in my home, we would go to church, right? And you would say the things you're supposed to say, love God, love Jesus. But then we would go home, right? And there's no mention of any God, there's no prayer, there's no discussion about that at all. And so now I will tell you today that my dad does regret that very strongly, but it was just something that, he didn't receive that growing up at all, so he didn't have anything to pass down to his kids. And so that is that was really important for me. Like, I would watch this, right? Every weekend we go to church, you talk about God, you come home, it's like as if that never happened. You go back to church, you do the same thing back and forth. And so that was a big part of my thinking about, who is God, what's God all about. So, still, the thing is that we've somehow found these, my parents found these families that would go to these churches, this church that we went to, and we'd have family friends. And it was really interesting that I think back about it now, like at Thanksgiving time, we would get together. It's, 3 families that got together, and we would have Thanksgiving celebrations together, which I really liked those. Those were very nice, wonderful times. And Easter, we'd get together for Easter. But still, I mean, even with the group of people that we were with somehow, by the way, all these pictures are just internet pictures. These are not pictures of my own family, just so you know. I just took a picture that would give some sort of like representation of what I thought I was trying to do. Anyway, yeah, so the thing is that it was even in those situations, there may have been a prayer like before the eating of the meal or something, but there was really no discussion about God, or no, it was not a part of the conversation at all. And so that also was kind of a big part of my initial formation, and thinking about God and things like that.
So your parents weren't Catholic then?
No, my parents were not Catholic.
Oh, okay.
That's a good point. Yeah, they were not Catholic. We went to a Presbyterian church, but I would not say that I received a Presbyterian formation. All the stuff that I would say about me growing up and stuff, it wouldn't be really necessarily fair to like the Presbyterian denomination to say that this is what they taught me, because really I didn't really learn so much because of just the weirdness of this kind of growing up. You know what I'm saying? I just would like to put that out there. Now the thing is, I had to put all this together, right? Just going to church, going home, this weird double life, and I was trying to figure out what is going on here. So eventually I did figure out, there was this explanation as to why this made sense. And that is because there was this unspoken rule that everybody knows, right? And so this was the rule that I had in my head. This is like, this worked, okay? You go to church, you do the right things, you fit in, okay? Then you will be accepted, and then you'll get to go to the party. That's the rule, and somehow everybody knew the rule, and no one talked about the rule. And this is kind of funny, like I say it, and it's like, how could you possibly believe that? But that's really what, I really did believe that. It was sincere. It was not like that was a sincere belief that I held at the time. It made sense to me. I put everything together. It was really, you go to church, it was just a sham. That was really my belief. But I think it was important to do that so that you could meet people that were somehow like decent, decent people. These people who created the sham. These are decent people somehow, and then you would get to go to the party and it would be a nice thing.
A lot of people think of that as like their theology, with heaven being the party.
Well, I mean, I guess, yeah, you go to church. The thing is that if it's a sham, right, you're just doing the right things, then it's like the relationship. You want to be in relationship, and if there's no relationship, then you might not like heaven. That's what I'm saying. So I just, has anyone ever had this kind of thing in their life where they this is like, you really thought this was it? This was like, you believed this for your life? I thought I was the only one. This is great. So you were like this?
I think the desire to fit in is very strong.
Yeah.
And so, but the idea of church being this sham thing and just having this kind of unspoken
I went
rule.
to the wrong church.
Okay.
I was a cradle Catholic in a very Protestant area.
Oh, okay. So
And
that
I
was a
dressed
different,
funny.
it's a little
I
different
dressed funny.
experience for you, yeah.
But I
Okay.
can see the disconnect,
All right.
absolutely.
Okay. Anyway, and so one of the things I would like to just impress upon people here is that if you really believe this, if you believe that there's this unspoken rule and that everything's a sham and what people say is just trying to get along and fit in, it's pretty hard to actually reach a person and say, no, this is real. You're like, yeah, it is real. You bet. That we're doing the unspoken rule thing. And so it's very hard to get an actual conversation, a meaningful conversation, spiritual one going in that situation. So that was kind of this thing that I had developed, and I think that by the time I'm in high school, I'm kind of operating according to this rule. Now, at this church that I was at, there was a little bit of a scandal where the pastor was essentially pushed out of the church. Now, the way this church worked is they had like a board, and it'd be like a few of the members of the church would get together, and they would be the board, and they kind of ran the church, and so they would vote and decide how things worked. It became, it's very, very political in that situation, and I do really like, the way the politics at the Catholic Church is totally different than the politics of this particular church that I grew up with. Now the thing is that my dad was on the board, and the thing is he just railed against the treatment of the pastor. And so the thing is he would go off and have these meetings in the evening. Of course, me and my brother were off in bed, and he comes home from the meetings, and he goes into his bedroom and talks to my mom, and he is very loudly upset at what is happening. And I think they would do things like somehow this board would call meetings, like an emergency meeting when the pastor's like on a vacation. The pastor would come back, cancel his vacation, come back and go to this board meeting thing. It really upset my dad strongly that this was happening. And so I'm sitting here, I don't like it. If my dad goes off to church, and he comes back upset, that means that, okay, something at church is bad. Something that is not good. Whatever's happening at church, it's a bad thing. And so I got to the point where it's like, okay, I don't know what the church is, but I do know it's bad. Church is bad, And now the thing is, like, if I were, talk to my dad about it today, he would tell me that he did not know that we could hear his super loud arguing in our tiny little house. Not arguing, just very loud sharing of his ranting. And so, but anyway, that's what happened. So that, so now I've got the unspoken rule, and I kind of got a general hatred for, like the church and some of the specific people that he would talk about as he's ranting at home about the church there. And so all of that comes together to kind of give me this view that I have of God. So I really I was very into science growing up. I was into that. And I really appreciated creation, the beauty of creation, just seeing the intricate details and the amazing aspects of creation. So I never dismissed that God existed. Okay, God exists. There's no way this earth just happens out of nothing. No way that happens. But you also have all this evil stuff going on. You got the bad stuff going on. So somehow, the only thing that made sense to me is that God started things, got a big old earth going, put some people on it, and then he was gone. He's like maybe observing from a distance, but certainly not in our lives, certainly not caring about us individually. There's just way too many people even think about there. So that was the view of God that I had kind of exiting the high school time. That was something that really made sense to me, and it really explained how evil could exist. It really explained how creation could be so beautiful. All that stuff made sense to me. I thought Deism was like the answer to everything. But, so I exit high school, go off to college, go to Texas A&M down there in Texas. And just kind of a lucky thing there. There was a really good program there. But anyway, for spiritual, there was a church there that was really good. Anyway, so Texas A&M was about a 3-hour drive from my house, and where I grew up. And so the thing is that this is remote, and so now I'm by myself. Now, different than my dad, where he moved around all the time. I did not. We grew up stayed in the same house from the time I was born until I got out of high school. So that was a different thing. So this is a new experience for me, like being in a different place, new people, strange people. I did not. That was a new thing for me. So I wanted to meet people. Well, how do you do that, right? So I knew that you go to church. If you want to meet people, you go to church. So it turns out that I was living in a dorm, And then there were these people that were living next to me. And they invited me to what was called this Aggie Awakening Retreat. And I was like, sure, that's the way I'm gonna meet people, right? And it turns out that this retreat was a Catholic retreat. Now, of course, I was not interested in the worship aspects or all, but you just go, you follow the rule, right? You go there, you follow the rule, you just do what you gotta do, and things will go the way you want them to go. Now, I go to a college, I go to this retreat, it's a Catholic retreat. Of course, they're gonna have Mass there. I'm gonna do everything I can to fit in. I do everything that people do. If there's a bowl of water there, they put their hand in it, I put my hand in it. If they tap their head I didn't know what they were doing, but I was just doing everything they did. They bow, they bow to the front of the building, I bow to the front of the building, whatever it is. I do the exact same thing. They start walking around, I start walking around. Everything it is that they did, I did. I did not want to be the least bit, detected as not fitting in. I was trying to fit in so that later on I could get invited to the party. That is what I was doing. So the thing is, I was there. I had no idea that. I didn't know that you were like a non-Catholic. I didn't even know that non-Catholics existed. I didn't know that there was like this thing between a Catholic. I did not know that was a thing. That you could be non-Catholic or you could be Catholic. You see what I'm saying? Anyway, so I went to that retreat, had a good time, and the thing is, it worked. So I made lots of friends. And we ended up having the lunch gang there. So we would have a group of people, a group of friends that I met there at the retreat. And the lunch gang sat together. And so, that my faith in the unspoken rule was validated once again. We're all sitting around just having a good time. Now, here's where Lent comes in. Okay, Lent comes in and kind of starts to mess things up a little bit. So, have you heard, I may have given a homily about this. Have you guys heard this story, this Lent story? Anybody? So here's the story. Okay, so I'm sitting there, and I'm having my lunch with the lunch gang, and so someone says, "It's Friday," and I say, "Have you heard this?"
No,
Okay.
just go
It's
with
Friday, and I'm like, yeah, it's Friday. Well, they're eating a hamburger. I'm like, yeah. Eating a hamburger. I mean, that would be weird, right? Because imagine someone's like, "Hey, it's Tuesday, and you're drinking a purple drink." Like, that's true, I guess. I don't know. So the thing is, it became that essentially was outed. I was outed because of Lent. So I then found out that there was a thing called being non-Catholic. Okay, and so now this whole thing about, wait a minute, this unspoken rule thing is not working, because really the rule was like you go to church and you do this stuff where you fit in, but it should not affect like anything else. You're away from the building, you're outside the building. The rule is over there for the building, it's not for, the party. When you're at the party, that's all that stuff is gone. So now I'm starting to kind of like get confused, and maybe I'm wondering, maybe the people that I had lunch with don't understand the rule or something. I don't know. I was trying to figure that this rule was starting to starting to wobble a little bit at this time. But anyway, I was still, I was there at the Aggie Awakening, I was fitting in with the group, and even though it came out that I was non-Catholic, somehow I ended up being a retreat leader. And the thing is, this was at the beginning of my sophomore year now. So freshman year, I attend the first one as an attendee, and so now the sophomore year, I'm playing a role as a leader. Now, fortunately for everyone, including me, everybody, I was just logistical support. That's all I was. I was not doing any kind of spiritual leading of anything or nothing religious. I was just there to make sure that all the nuts and bolts were there and the things didn't come apart while I was there. That's what I did. Now the thing is, while I was at this thing, there's this prayer team that was off-site. I didn't really know about the prayer team when I was an attendee, but when you're running this thing, there's there's this group of people someplace remotely, and they were praying the whole time during the retreat. And I'm like, that is kind of interesting. What's up with that? that doesn't make any sense at all. You know, why would people do that? And so, and I remember having to make a trip to go do something, either get something to the prayer team or get something from the prayer team. I can't remember what it was, but I did some sort of a trip. I go there, and it was like, that was just not adding up, because, you know, there was, how in the world, you know, are you sitting off, just not even talking to people, you're not even trying to fit in, but I didn't understand what was going on with that. So now, this whole unspoken rule thing is starting to really, you know, I'm starting to have a hard time with it. I was just thinking, well, maybe people are trying just a little too hard to fit in or something. I was trying to find out some way to make sense of this. But anyway, I started dating my wife, Cynthia. She was one of the people in the lunch crew, and so she begins to explain to me, okay, now when you're not Catholic, your behavior is a little different at Mass than if you are Catholic. You need to like not receive communion. But she said, how about, you know, why don't you become Catholic, huh? Now the problem with that was that, you know, all that history of like church and that it was going to be a hurdle that was too tall for me at that time. And so I really was like, no, definitely not doing that. And so at that point I thought, maybe I don't really belong here at this church or something. So I kind of just started pulling back a little bit from participating or being there. I just, you know, didn't really feel like I belonged there. Now the thing is, I did get married to Cynthia, but I just want, you know, I really wanted her to understand that I would not ever become Catholic. That was something that was just like, hey, you know, I'm not going to cross this line. So if we ever do get married, I am not going to become Catholic. But I did not actually let her know the degree to which I really just did not like church. You know, I kind of had a hatred for church in general, and I didn't let her know that. I should have probably said something about that, but I did not let her know that. But she did know that I would not become Catholic. Now the thing is, it was very important to Cynthia that she get married in the Catholic Church. I didn't really care, you know, what church we got married in. And then it was kind of interesting about this time, my parents were like, hey, by the way, you know, we're kind of Protestant. And it's like, yeah, what does that mean? Well, we're protesting the Catholic Church. Like, oh, okay, I did not know that. That was probably like one of the first things we had talk about God outside of church or something. Anyway, that really didn't mean much to me. That didn't mean, it just let me know that my parents weren't like cool with Catholics. That's really what I kind of found out about at that time. Now, a part of the whole marriage thing in the Catholic Church is that you sign this form. It says that if you have kids, you're going to raise them Catholic. Now the thing is, for me, kids were like a long way down the long way down the road. It's almost an abstract thing, and you know it's important to Cynthia, so I didn't really care. So sure, you bet, you know, I'm going to sign that form. Now that form would be a big grace for me, because I never poisoned my kids' faith as they were growing up and things like that. And so that actually ended up kind of circling back around to help me later on. But I didn't really sign a form that says I'll support my wife's faith. I never did that. So that would also come around here. Now, 9 months and 6 days after my marriage, we have a baby. I got to tell you, you know, so I was still in college when we got married, and then I told my friends, hey, we're getting married, and then like, a couple of months later, hey, I got a kid on the way, and they're like, well, when's it due? And then they're like, you'd tell them, let's see, I'm like, it was due in September. They'd be like, their eyes would go up, and they're like trying to do the math. So the thing is, I was so happy when we got over the whole 9 month threshold there. That was kind of a relief for me. Now the thing is, Cynthia starts to make this big deal about getting my kid baptized, right? Or getting our kid baptized, and I'm like, what is this? This is, you know, why does this have to be such a big deal? So at this time we're living in California, but we gotta do this thing, go down to Texas and have the kid baptized, big deal. And I'm starting to think, wow, you know, Cynthia's attachment to church is very, very strong, and I'm not really liking that, because you think about it, you know, the more attachment and attention she gives to church, well then that's less for me, right? And I don't think I want to share my wife with the church, so I mean, it's a zero-sum thing, right? There's only so much attention and so much, you know, and liking you can give, right? Anyway, that's kind of messed up, but anyway, the thing is, that is what was in my mind, okay? And plus, I wasn't really happy about church. Of course, she didn't know that. Anyway, so I'm not, yeah, and I guess I'll do mention that my daughter's name, the first kid that I have, her name is Monica. We named her Monica. This silly, for me, I had no idea about like Saint Monica, the one that was always like there to try to help the conversion of her kid. But the thing is, I do think that not very much of a coincidence that Monica was named Monica, because she will play a role down the road here in helping me kind of just find God in a lot of ways. But the thing is, we had the baby, and we were living in California there, and I was really confused about the whole taking kids to church thing. So, I mean, growing up in our church, we never had kids in our church. When we were at Texas A&M, you know, it was all college kids, there were not babies there. And so then we go to California, we have our own baby, and the baby makes like a little tiny peep, just a little beep, you know, sound like, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is terrible, we gotta get this kid out of here, you know? And my wife is like, what is your problem? So for Cynthia, she was like totally okay with like having babies in, of course, it's just like a part of the culture. And I was totally not okay with that. I was not okay with that. So now, here's a situation where every week we've got this conflict where I'm wanting to take the kid out of church, and she's like, there's no big deal, let's just have the kid stay in church. So every week there's this conflict, and so now my irritation is, you know, becoming more and more inflamed with church. And so I come to this conclusion that really what I need to do is start tearing down Cynthia's faith, because it's getting in my way. And so this was something that I didn't tell Cynthia about or anything like that, but I really did in my mind, like, I am going to look for every little opportunity that I can to take a ding on the whole faith aspect. And I did that. Now the thing is, I will say that sometimes the church helped me out a lot. It's more like a building that was kind of going to collapse in on its own. Because seriously, like the Christmas Eve services that we were out there in California, as well as when we moved to Idaho, super inhospitable, you know, overcrowded. It was like, you know, people were not into making it comfortable at all. It was always be uncomfortable, have little kids there at a Christmas Eve thing. There was, for some reason, like our first communion with our kids always ended up being a really painful experience. But with Monica, when she got her first communion, it was a situation where they had like a mass and then another mass like right after it. And then all the people are trying to leave mass, you know, this first mass, but all these people are just pinned up, ready to go in, and there was not enough space for the parents to see their kids receive First Communion. So some people weren't going to get it, and I certainly was not going to fight other people and push them out of the way so that I could have a seat to see my kids' First Communion. So, and this was, we had invited some other people to kind of come and see our kids' First Communion. It was a very painful, miserable experience, and that was really easy just to like, hey, you know, Cynthia, look at this. This is our church, right? So just kind of keep pushing that church over, knocking it down. And then also sometimes, I know priests are kind of overworked, I guess, and sometimes they would just be real rude or grumpy. So there was some times where the church was kind of helping me with my efforts to, of course the thing is, no matter what, you've got a group of people, you're going to find something to complain about. If you're looking for something to complain about, it'll be there. It'll always be, it doesn't really matter how good it is. But anyway, that was my goal, that was my effort. I was pushing that, and eventually we did get to the point where we stopped going to church. Now, really what was happening is Cynthia was just kind of becoming more and more silent. It's not like her faith was actually being lost. It's just like, okay, I can't push this anymore. She just kind of started to be quiet about it at that point. Anyway, I kind of regret all that, just so you know. I'll just say that. But, so now at church, there's a Mormon coworker there. And so he approaches me and he starts talking about religion. Now the thing with the Mormon religion is it's very esoteric. It's very, you really don't know that much about what's going on with the religion unless you read some books or something that people talk about it. If you don't know about the Mormon religion, there's a lot that's there. It's not a Christian tradition. It's not a Christian religion, and so it's got a lot of strange things to it. But one of the things about the religion is it's very much an exchange-based thing. You do this, you get this. It's very much an exchange back and forth type of thing. And so that kind of started to this makes sense with the rule. But in my looking at the Mormon religion, I decided to read some books about the Mormon religion that were written by Christians to say, okay, there's some things here that are not quite right about the Mormon faith. And the thing in that reading, these people were talking about things about how they could pray for things and then see things happen in their lives. There's this back and forth going on where they would pray for things. Hey, please God, help me with this or whatever, lead me with that. And then and I was reading this book, I was like, well, that's kind of interesting. I did not know that could ever happen, really. That was the first time where the idea of spirituality and prayer and God actually being in someone's life, that was the first time I was starting to be exposed to that, actually possibly really happening. So now this whole unspoken rule thing is starting to, come apart really in this whole aspect about talking about the Mormon thing. And I did not pursue the Mormon thing too. I did look into the books and reading some of that, but I was not really interested in pursuing that too much. One of the big things that changed us forever was that my wife has a sister, and her sister had a family. And so that family experienced financial ruin due to a job loss. And they were down in Texas, and we were over in Idaho. And so they're losing their house, losing their car and everything. So we decided to say, he said, why don't you come live with us? Mike was his name. So the husband can go and get his degree at the Boise State University there. And then, so for 3.5 years, they lived with us. And I got to tell you, communal living is crazy different. If you haven't done it, it's crazy, okay? Because you got two families in one house that's made for one family. So you have one kitchen, you have 2 bathrooms for 8 people. And, at first, when they first came in, the first few weeks, if me and Cindy had an argument, we'd go off to the bathroom, or to the bedroom, and whisper. And sometimes if you're really mad, you whisper really loudly. And then, but eventually, after a few weeks, that's just too much, right? This whole going off. So then you just let it rip right there in the kitchen. You're gonna be like, yeah, well, this is what I think. And the thing is, the communal living there is no gap. There's the veneer that you kind of put on as you get outside your house. The veneer is totally gone, and you see people's all the warts and the pores, and you see people really close up. And so it was in that context really that things really changed for me. So this whole thing of communal living totally changed my life because so my wife's sister, she really lived out her Catholic faith. And the thing is that I would never be able to say that I understood that she wasn't a sham if we weren't in this communal living situation. The fact that we were living the communal living thing, there was no way to hide it. You know what I'm saying? It's not like you could pretend to be living your Catholic faith, your Lenten faith, in this communal situation. And so I was able to see her really living that, and so that this whole the unspoken rule is just kind of like getting obliterated during this whole time where the communal living situation, because it didn't make any sense. Starting to keep further and further saying, no, this thing isn't working for me, this rule. And the thing is, at the same time as this communal living thing is going on, my daughter kind of has this spiritual awakening going on with her. She's in this 8th, 9th grade kind of time period. And she would, it was really uncanny, it was so uncanny. Like, she would pray for things and things would really happen. I mean, it would really happen. So, it was even to the point, like, if we were like, one time we were out in the park and we threw a frisbee and we cannot find it. We're out here, and so then we're sitting over by next to my daughter, and she's, and so we can't find the frisbee, but there's a bunch of people looking for this frisbee. It's been going on for a long time, 30 minutes now or something, looking around. We're not gonna find this frisbee. So she goes, hey, watch this. And she was like, hey, watch this. And then she says, St. Anthony, blah, blah, please help me find, please just help us find this frisbee. And like, she says that, and then it's like, you can hear, found it. It's like, but that, and the thing is that it's one thing is like, if you say like, watch this, and then you pray, and then it happens, it's crazy. That is just, and things like that were happening a lot. Okay, that was just one little example, but it was happening a lot. And so now I'm like, wow, this is real. This stuff is happening. People are actually kind of having this relationship with God, and He's answering, He's listening, He's responding, and things like that. And so that was, this point, anyway, that was me finding out, wow, God is a lot closer. This whole deism thing kept, like, not making sense anymore. And then, the big surprise, so Mike, when he came to live with us, I mean, he was super anti-Catholic. When he came in, he was living with us. So me and him were kind of buds, right? The two of us were the non-Catholics, the rest of the household was Catholics. And he converted to the Catholic faith. And I was like, what is going on? This is crazy. And so, so now at this point, it becomes the situation where, he was hostile. He was hostile to the Catholic Church, and he was always ready to have some sort of little ding to say to the church. But he joined the church. He goes in there, and so I was